Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, did you have fun playing fantasy football this weekend?
Remarkable fun.
Remarkable.
I beat the hell out of you, so there's that.
Yeah, you did. But because the Norse Code League has two leagues technically, that's not the game anybody's talking about.
I have no idea what you're referencing. They must be talking about the drubbing I gave you.
Yeah,
just an absolute walloping.
That is exactly it. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We'll touch on that more in just a moment, but just want to thank you guys so much for listening. We will be doing kind of an abbreviated episode this week because we are on the bye and we are kind of gearing up for the live show, which we'll be doing at Pedosky's in Seattle on Friday. So before we do anything else, just want to thank you guys so much for listening, for checking out the show, for sharing links to us on social media or just to friends. Again, thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. If you enjoy the show, if you listen to the show and hear value in what we put out, you can donate to the show in one of two different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. That's much more of a subscription base. Or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode. If you use the Patreon donation for $3.50 more per month, you will receive free swag from us. We're doing that promotion. This will probably be the last time I mention it, unless I say it on the live show, just out of habit. This will be the last time we mention it because we'll be stopping out the free swag at the end of this month. So if you are looking to do that, now is your time. $3.50 or more per month will get you the free swag from Norse Code. I did send out the first batch of that. You should be receiving that if you had confirmed your email address and an address with me. The international packages will take a couple of days to get there. I think we're not going to be doing international next year, but if you received an email from me confirming your address, you should have swag in your mailbag right now. So let's go to our new donations. Our first one is from Krishna Nelson, who goes via Patreon and says, "Thanks, Arif and James, for the amazing show. Look forward to it every week. As a Vikings fan living amongst Bengals fans in Cincinnati," that is tragic, "I appreciate how your analysis brings me closer to my favorite team. Arif, as I am someone who is Swindian, half Swedish, half Indian, and a fellow foodie, what is your favorite Indian and Swedish cuisine to cook?"
So here's the thing. I don't like Indian food all that much. So I never cook it because I had it like every day for like 17 years.
Indian food is only good to you if it's dangerous and about to kill you. As we discovered in New York, it's like, this is really good, right, yeah, but it's questionable at best.
Yeah. Which is not to say I like at specific moments I will enjoy Indian food, but I never really took the time to care that much about learning to cook it. Although we did decide to do it at my brother's place for Christmas one year. It turned out really excellently. So that was a vindaloo recipe, which a lot of people think is like traditional Indian. It kind of depends on your definition of traditional. But like tomatoes are not native to India, kind of like they're not native to Italy. But they're like part of a vindaloo. So that was actually a lot of fun to cook. Remember to bloom your spices in the hot oil for about 30 seconds before you add any liquid. But I love lamb vindaloo. Pork vindaloo is phenomenal too. So I'll say that. For Swedish food, I mean, sometimes I just like a pannekuchen. It's really good.
Nothing wrong with that. I like gravlax. Yeah. Gravlax is really good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the preserved fish aside from the one in Lye.
Yes. That's more of a Norwegian thing, but yes.
Right. Which, by the way, lutefisk way more popular in Minnesota than it is in Norway.
Yeah.
I don't understand, but yeah, I love all of it. I love salt cod. I love gravlax. I love all that stuff.
Yeah, gravlax is really good. The thing about gravlax is it can get salty if you're not paying attention to it. So you do have to, take a little bit of control there. But otherwise, gravlax is pretty good. Also, Jacob donates via Patreon $3.51 because he loves us that extra penny more a month. Thank you, Jacob. We appreciate that. These things go towards all sorts of important things. They help with a new chair if we need a new chair, or provide WD-40 for a podcaster in need. It also helps with things like helping with keeping the lights on, paying for our storage through Libsyn, which is our distributor, and it also assists with things like our live taping of Norse Code at Pedosky's, starting at about 7 p.m. Pacific time in Seattle proper. We will be doing the live show. The next episode you hear from us will be the live episode. We'll be taping on November 29th, once again at 7 p.m. Likely be actually starting the recording sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. We will also be giving away a ticket to the game on Monday. So if you are interested in going to the game, please show up and listen to the show. We will be happy to talk. Arif is happy to get into arguments with you in person, because I feel like that's the reason why people show up to these things. If you ever wanted to experience arguing with Arif in person, now is your opportunity to do so at Pedosky's, November 29th, this Friday, starting at 7 p.m. I'm just gonna
This feels like you're creating an open invite to argue with me about anything. And I'll say this: I will refuse to engage sometimes. I'm just gonna be like, all right, bye.
No, if they this is not how this works. If they show up to the taping, by God, you will at least look in their general direction and call them a moron. This is for their beliefs, not because they showed up to the taping, but for their belief.
Showing up, very smart, non-moron type activity.
Exactly.
Definitely show up. Don't be a moron.
You do want to show
showing up and then being a moron.
That's different.
That's very moronic.
Yes, you want to come out to Pedosky's and see the contingent from Seattle Twitter that will likely be around. Have you kept it a secret from them, or are you just are you aware of their organizational presence?
I don't know if Seahawks Twitter is aware that we'll be at Petoskey's, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them know I'll be in Seattle. I don't know. I'm still trying to organize getting a member of the Seahawks podcast community into the live showing. A number of them will be away with families during Thanksgiving. RIP. I cannot believe that. The audacity.
Terrible people.
But yeah, we'll see. If not, I'll probably just send out an open invite to Seahawks Twitter and deal with that.
Like, wow, there's so many of you. It's almost like Arif is your mascot. It's a darn shame. Before we start talking about kind of where we stand after the bye week, do you have anything to say to your legions of listeners in regards to your love of the extra point rule for Norse Code?
It's I forgot to prepare something for this. No, I mean it's hilarious. There's no other way to look at it. It's not as if, we enter this league hoping to prove that we're the best among this random selection of people.
Oh no.
At fantasy football. It's more to really just demonstrate how ridiculous fantasy football is, which is not to say that you can't be good at it or that it's not a repeatable skill. Obviously, there's a bunch of professional fantasy football analysts and players out there that repeatably do well. So that's obviously like a thing. But also, like, it's as if you're playing Texas Hold'em, but with a Joker card in there. Like, what are you doing? This is insane. And so you just kind of have to embrace the insanity of it. It kind of reveals the curtain when it comes to fantasy football of how weird and random and stupid it is. And that's fine. And you should learn to embrace it. Nietzsche talked about something called eternal recurrence. And that's the idea that the universe repeats again and again and again. Whether that's literally true or not is not important. But the question he poses with this concept in mind is, if you could live your life the exact same way with no changes once more, would you do it? And if the answer is no, you need to get your life together. And a lot of that is just to kind of embrace the joys and absurdity that come with life. There's been kind of a Dadaist shoot off of some of these concepts that where people kind of embrace absurdity, and that's fine. And there's two ways of looking at the idea of eternal recurrence. One is that it's very heavy and fatalist and bad, but I think Nietzsche wanted you to embrace joy in that context. And then in response, people are saying, well, hey, actually, you have one life to live. Why not live it to its fullest? Don't worry about fatalism. But just know that if you can't control events in your life, that's just going to be something that you'll adapt, because you can't control all the events in your life. So try to look for stuff. So I think the kicker rule in the Norse Code League, I think that does a lot for philosophically for our approach to life. It reminds us that when things are out of control, we have to look for the things that bring us joy in those contexts. So really, I think it's really one way to spread joy that, honestly, it goes underappreciated. I'm seeing quote tweets of me talking about the Norse Code League. People are like, why would you ever join this league? Well, for philosophical fulfillment.
Sorry, I'm wiping away the tears right now. Truly special. For those who don't know, Arif's kicker, the Tampa Bay kicker, Gay is his last name, missed 3 extra points this week.
My God.
At one point.
How do you miss the third? That's the thing that gets me. Miss 2, fine. How do you miss the third one?
How does the team put him back out there?
Yeah, you missed your second extra point. Go for 2, man. Who cares? Like, what? So I have no idea what happened in this game. Maybe it was a situation where, and presumably because it's Tampa Bay, this didn't happen. But I don't even have any idea what the final score was. But presumably in this game, the only way that happens is if you score a touchdown to tie it and you're kicking to go ahead. That's the only situation where I can think you would do that. Otherwise, if you score a touchdown to get 1 point behind, kicking to tie it, that doesn't make any sense. You're probably kicking at less than 100. Well, you're kicking at less than 100%. There's no 100% probability. So you take the 50% chance of scoring 2 points, which is greater than your 80% chance or whatever of kicking that extra point. So that can't be it. It has to be a situation. I'm going to look this up right now because this is nuts to me. What was the final score of the Tampa Bay game?
While you're doing that, I just want to mention that there were 2 games.
They won?
Yes, they did. So there's 2 Norse Code leagues, Norse Code 1 and Norse Code 2. And in the other league, Gay was owned by somebody who was facing an opponent that had the Carolina kicker who missed 2 extra points. So at one point,
Joey Sly.
At one point, the kicker, I screenshotted it and put it on Twitter, -74 to -41, because he had made a couple of field goals. So there was a -74 to -41. The -25 point rule for missed extra points truly is the best rule in all of fantasy football. And I live for the people who freak out over the mentions on Twitter about it. Thank you for tagging me in the tweet.
Where so mad.
Where people lost their minds about it. Truly.
This was bonkers. Holy crap. So Via Vea threw a pass to Jameis Winston for a touchdown. Ndamukong Suh had a fumble 6, returning wow. Also, the third missed kick was actually blocked, according to this ESPN game recap. So, and then they scored another touchdown and kicked it and made that extra point. So they bookended the game with made extra points.
But if he misses that, they leave him there. Like there's no.
They actually trotted him out for a field goal in the fourth quarter as well. After he had missed 2 and had another one blocked, he tried a 32-yard field goal, made it. It was just the middle chunk of the game where this just wasn't happening.
Just some of the worst yips in history. I will say that in the history of the Norse Code League, I've seen 2 missed. I've never seen 3.
I've never seen 3. That's just wild to me.
This also, is rarefied air.
Tampa Bay, who have had I'm not going to say kicker luck as bad as the Vikings, but rather kicker problems that are deeper than the Vikings.
Well, they drafted them. Like they drafted
in the
them
second
early.
round. Like if you knew you were getting the best kicker of all time, period. If you knew that, I still wouldn't draft them in the second round. Because your value over a replacement kicker that you find in undrafted free agency is like pretty good. And I don't know if that's what I want to spend a second round pick on. That's insane. Also, he had like a huge problem with kicks inside 40 yards in college. That seems like something you should pay attention to.
Yeah, just a little bit. So now that we've spent a little bit of time discussing, well, basic philosophy, nihilism, and embracing the random, let's see where the Vikings stand after the bye week. The three things that we learned this week while the Vikings were off are that the Packers were exposed on national TV, and that felt good. The Lions can't even sign a quarterback from the XFL. And
amazing.
And that the Bears are currently the 8th ranked NFC team and also proceed to play the Cowboys, Packers, Chiefs, and Vikings next. Where do you want to start? I think we should start with the Lions because that's beautiful.
It really is, isn't it? So the Lions tried to sign Josh Johnson, Jeff Driscoll, who replaces Matt Stafford, who I believe can technically still return, but should basically just be out for the season because, like, why?
Yeah, that back injury doesn't sound like it's getting any better.
Right. But in theory, there's a window where he returns for week 16 or something like that, which screw it. It doesn't matter. Let him like recuperate for once.
Your team is not making the playoffs. Sit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Jeff Driscoll, who is Jeff Driscoll, he's hilariously bad at Florida, injured. So they promote whoever it is from the practice squad and Blau from Western Kentucky, I want to say, like David Blau or something like that. Just like Western Kentucky was like Brandon Doty or something like that. I have no idea who Blau is. So they want to sign a guy, and the guy that you turn to when you don't want to sign Colin Kaepernick, but also don't want to be accused of being racist, is Josh Johnson, who has been signed, I think, 3 times in that exact scenario. But after seeing 51 different quarterbacks start in the NFL and not getting a phone call, wisely decided to pursue the XFL. The XFL has standardized contract language that disallows players from signing with NFL teams until the end of the XFL season, which means no mid-season XFL signings, which normally that's actually not a problem because it just takes place at the AAF. It would be spring football. So if you become a star in the XFL partway through the year and an NFL team wants to sign you, they can't sign you and then just stop you from playing for the rest of the year in the XFL. You have to play out the season. And that's what the XFL wants. I kind of understand that. But if you're Josh Johnson, you know that an NFL team might at some point just call in the middle of the season. Because, again, that's happened many times to you in particular. Now, XFL contracts are non-negotiable in theory. They offer like a standard contract. They give you the money that they're going to give you, and that's that. In part because the AAF collapsed, and so they made their contract structures significantly more rigorous than they had initially advertised, which caused some problems. They're now paying players a lot less than they promised. But again, because the AAF collapsed, they don't have to worry about that because the CFL has an import rule for you can only sign so many non-Canadians. There's just not much competition for the XFL, so they've standardized the contract language and stricter and created stricter terms. So I would still probably not do that because one game day contract at the NFL is probably half an XFL season. So yeah, rough. And the Lions obviously they can't find a way around it. So cool.
It does bring to light at least how much the XFL players are going to be making. Like if nothing else, it gives us that sort of information for those who are potentially interested in playing for the XFL. you're kind of screwed. Also, it really does show that if you sign up for this, you are stuck. There's no getting out of this early. Not even if you need to get picked up by the Lions. So Green Bay's defense looked like trash, and I enjoyed a tweet that said the defense kept them in it. And I wanted to scream, what defense? But wow. It was so nice to see Green Bay just get stomped and have the game basically be over by halftime. You could have done anything you wanted. You could have watched the new Watchmen. You could have watched The Mandalorian. There were so many options. You could have watched new Rick and Morty. Your evening was basically done by 9.
I got to catch up on The Mandalorian, man. I love that yodelet so much. What happens next? Yeah, man. What a way to spend your evening. Kevin King is real bad. Like there's so many good players in that Green Bay defense, and it's all just obviated by the fact that it's like Kevin King. I think he leads the league in yards allowed among all corners. And in fairness, like the other option is like throwing to Jair Alexander. So it's like one of the worst corners in the league or one of the best. I don't know. What should I be doing here? Yeah, and it just like, that's like the thing. Like we talk about, I've mentioned this before. I don't know if actually we just talked about Justice. I don't know if Justice is the one that came up with it, but he's the one that had a discussion with me about this concept of protectors versus creators. So, which it doesn't really have to do with your side of the ball, but protectors are like offensive linemen and cornerbacks where you're trying to prevent an action from happening. Creators are like defensive linemen or wide receivers where you're trying to obviously create. And the problem is that protection groups fall apart at the weakest link, whereas creation groups can rely on a single star with weaknesses at the other positions. And it's not, 1-to-1. Obviously, offensive linemen can run block, and so they're creating there. But for the most part, it kind of holds true. And so offensive linemen, cornerbacks the same way. Green Bay has a weak link problem in that defense. And that's an issue because Aaron Rodgers isn't elite anymore, so he can't carry them out of games.
I enjoyed the belief that they were going to come back after that touchdown, and just watching Twitter explode as a 61-yard bomb is unleashed. Like, oh, that's right. The fun thing about this, ignoring the fact that Minnesota is going to have to go through either Green Bay or the Rams if they want to make a serious run at this. Green Bay is the number 2 team in the NFC right now by their not by their schedule, but by their record. They are not in the Rams league, or not the Rams. They're not in like San Francisco's like league. It's almost like not even like the same sport. They have a month and a half to figure out what the hell they're gonna do. Like that was a spanking on national TV on Sunday night, a full on like rubbing your butt afterwards spanking. It was glorious.
And it creates a really huge opportunity for the Vikings because if the Vikings win out, I think it is impossible for Green Bay to win the division because that would include a game against Green Bay. Mm-hmm. So if they win out, Green Bay earns another loss. They're 12-4. The Vikings win out. Obviously, they're 13-3. Vikings win the division without having to worry about the fact that Green Bay holds 2 tiebreakers or something like that over them. So it'd be difficult to overcome. But the Vikings absolutely have to get one more win than Green Bay, because otherwise, obviously, with those tiebreakers, that's a problem. That means that if, and obviously, I mean, that's difficult because not only do you have a game against Green Bay, you've got a game against the Seahawks and the ever-talented but easy-suffering Chargers. So it's not easy, obviously, to win out, but that creates a playoff spot where the Vikings have the ability to win the division, get a home field advantage, and then from there, you have to do something that Vikings fans are, of course, loath to do, which is cheer against the Saints. Really tough.
That is difficult.
Yeah. It's tough. And so the Saints have a game against Tennessee, who are now with Ryan Tannehill are better than, their record. But I mean, obviously they're going to win against Tennessee. They're probably going to win against Carolina in week 17. But they've got a game against Indianapolis, which they're pretty decent. I think they're kind of overrated, but you've got an opportunity there. Most importantly, they also play San Francisco, which means we get a barometer for how good both teams are, because if San Francisco stomps them, it's like, well, okay, what are we even doing? But the Saints, if they lose to San Francisco, then the Vikings, I think, have a great shot at that second seed. Because if the Saints win out, I'm playing with the playoff machine real quick. Yeah, if the Saints win out, but except with a loss to San Francisco, I think the Vikings get the second seed, which obviously would be pretty tremendous. But yeah, there's an opportunity for the Vikings to still actually get, thanks to that San Francisco win, to get a first round bye. And then beyond that, they may potentially, they probably can't catch first seed because San Francisco would have to falter in a significant way without losing to the Saints at the same time. But it is technically possible.
Yeah, this was fun to watch. It was almost cathartic to a certain extent, watching Aaron Rodgers flop around on the ground asking for flags when he was barely touched. It really, there was just such a nice, it was a feel good moment. I brought all the family in and we all sat and watched, and the first half that we were going to sit through the second, but real good stuff. And then we have Chicago, who are still technically in the hunt, but I can't imagine a situation where the Vikings end up losing out and the Seahawks end up losing out and they end up winning out. As I said, they play the Cowboys, Packers, Chiefs, and Vikings next. I could see them taking 2, but
if San Francisco, let's say San Francisco loses to Baltimore, which is certainly conceivable.
That's going to be such a good game.
Yeah. They beat the Saints, and then, and they lose to the Seahawks. In that case, and the Vikings went out, and San Francisco beats the Rams, which is fair. So they're both 13-3. The Vikings do actually end up getting the first seed because of win percentage in common games. So so they win the tiebreaker over New Orleans for win percentage in conference games, and they win the tiebreaker over San Francisco in win percentage. So they can actually still get the top seed, which is absurd. There's 2 very losable games, because I mean they already lost the Seahawks once, so there's 2 losable, if you want to use that word, games for San Francisco left on the roster.
This really does feel like the scene in basketball where they're breaking down the playoff chances at this point. Like, yeah, there's they're gonna solve the number 1 seed for the NFC with alternating sack races on alternating Sundays until a winner is declared. Be fantastic. So, other than Green Bay and the Lions, Chicago is still winning, but still in very rough shape offensively, and are barely squeaking out the games they are. So, and to their Vikings credit, nobody got arrested as far as we know. Nobody is being investigated for domestic assault. Nobody's being investigated over potential Dewey or weapons charges or anything. It was a nice, quiet Vikings bye week. It's almost like they were threatened with something and told to stay home to make sure that nobody did anything dumb. It's beautiful. Totally fine with this. So that's where the North stands right now. The Vikings are still technically tied with the Packers, although the Packers have they have the tiebreaker on them right now. So
right. So the Packers currently, if the season were to end today for some reason, but they still held the playoffs, the Packers, I think, would be the 3rd seed and the Vikings would be the 6th seed, I want to say.
Yeah. So that's where we're at.
So they would play each other, which is even better.
Yeah. When I was going through the playoff machine earlier today for about an hour trying to figure out different scenarios, I was struck by how many times the Vikings and the Packers were going to end up playing each other. The
probability seems remarkably high.
Yeah, that's the one point. I'm like, this is just destined to happen, isn't it? This is what happens this year, and it's probably gonna.
But so here's also the thing. So we essentially have the 6 teams for the NFC. I'm not going to say locked in, but like there's a really good chance it's these 6 teams. So Dallas, Seattle, Green Bay, Minnesota, New Orleans, and San Francisco. And 3 of the potential opponents would all feel kind of poetic in some way, right? Like if it's Seattle, that makes a lot of sense for like rivalry reasons. They've played each other a bunch. Green Bay, obviously. New Orleans, obviously. So it is kind of interesting that we're shaping up to have a playoff race where the Vikings can have a fairly meaningful first game, or, even have a bye and then have a very meaningful second game.
Yeah. I like how the Cowboys don't factor in any of that. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, they've got like a history to the 70s. That's not interesting. They'll just show the Hail Mary push-off like 8 times in the bumpers. Great.
And when they showed that in the... right before the Hail Mary throw against the Vikings, with the Cowboys-Vikings a couple of weeks ago, I think Eric Thompson just lost his mind on Twitter. It's like, don't you dare show that right now. We all know what you're trying to do. It's not going to work. Just stop it. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. Don't you put that evil on me. So, all right. We, as I said before, this is kind of an abbreviated episode, so we are going to go to the mailbag. The first third or so of this is going to be football questions. You feel free to skip the rest if you are not interested in the Thanksgiving takes, which will take up roughly the last 2/3 of the mailbag. So the first question is from Nathan Atkins, who asks, do you foresee any scenario where if the Vikings finish the season 12-4 and somehow miss the playoffs?
No. So that is actually mathematically impossible. And that's one of the reasons that it really seems like these 6 teams are the 6 teams, because the 7th team out of the playoffs currently has 5 losses, and that's the LA Rams. And honestly, I expect them to have more. But if the LA Rams win out and the Vikings go 12-4, the Vikings still make the playoffs. So there's no scenario mathematically where the Vikings miss the playoffs at 12-4. There are a couple of scenarios, however unlikely, that the Vikings do miss out in the playoffs at 11-5, but I think you have to like navigate your way through the playoff machine maze in order to make that happen, because they do, outside of Green Bay, hold actually a bunch of tiebreakers in those scenarios.
Next question is from Steezo, who asks, is Holton Hill a solution at punt return / kick return?
So I found this interesting because in training camp and in spring and OTAs and stuff, Holton Hill was occasionally returning punts. He also was the up man on kickoff returns, and so when they practice their kickoff returns, sometimes they practice shorter kickoff returns, and the up man usually gets a couple of chances to return it. So usually that's a fullback or the fullback adjacent running back. So often it was Matt Asiata, and obviously CJ Ham was there a lot. So the up man isn't always a returner. They're obviously an additional blocker. But sometimes it was Holton Hill. I was kind of curious about that, so I asked about that in spring. And special teams coordinator Marwan Malouf said, that he's actually fairly natural at catching punts, which I want to stress is very rare. We've had people who've returned punts in college and returned kicks in college field punts in Vikings camp a bunch and like not be very good at it. That 5th round pick who had a vlog, I forget his name, comes to mind. His name wasn't Rodney Smith. That was like the Florida State guy, but it was the guy that was drafted in the same class as Stacy Coley. And he was just abysmal at catching punts. And obviously we saw Mike Hughes screw up catching punts a lot. If Holton Hill is, despite not having returned punts, and I think they had a fairly impressive return game in Texas, so maybe he was just kind of edged out of that by just a superior returner. But if he is actually fairly natural at catching and returning punts, I think that's certainly an option. Malouf seemed actually fairly excited about Holton Hill. I just looked up all of the quotes where he talked about Holton Hill, which isn't much, but 5 different pressers he's brought him up or someone else has brought him up. And the fact that he actually brought up Holton Hill unprompted in at least 2 of these pressers and singled him out for praise, I think is meaningful. One of them was just kind of as a generic special teamer, but another one was as a returner. He thinks that, Hill has some capability both in kickoff and punt. And honestly, the Vikings have a ball security problem at both of those positions. And that's a problem. Like, a ball security problem is always an issue, but because they're magnified on punt and kickoff returns, like fumble rates triple on kickoff returns, and might double or even worse on punt returns. It's more likely to happen. So having that problem makes it really just a huge issue. And plus, there's the field position problem of fumbling a kickoff is just tremendous. It's way worse than fumbling like on a strip sack or something. That's your priority. Like, a lot of people want explosive returners, and I get it. And we've watched some really good explosive returners in Minnesota, but the priority is to make sure that you don't lose the ball in ways that are not the priority from regular offensive play. Like, I think for all of the guff that people gave Adrian Peterson for his fumbles, his running style obviously was worth it, because even though it led to a couple of fumbles here and there, I mean, he produced so much more as a runner than other runners in the same position would have, that you'll just take up those accumulated gains over that specific singular loss. Ball security is just way more. So if Hill has better security returning punts than Mike Hughes, they should experiment with it right away.
Brad Davis says, Arif often talks about how an offense or a defense is a top X team. But why not talk about them in terms of percentiles? Is a top 4 defense's abilities pretty consistent over time in terms of extra wins added value over replacement, or is there a considerable year-to-year variance in what that means? How would the 2017 Vikings defense compare to the league's this year? Does that even matter? Or does how defense work change so quickly that the whole idea of percentiles falls flat?
No, I think this is actually a good way to look at it. In fact, I might just start incorporating it into articles going forward, because I think that's a smarter way of thinking about it. Because actually, this year's a really good example. You take the 2017 Vikings defense, which was number 1 by a lot of measures, number 2 by some other measures, dueling obviously with the Jacksonville Jaguars that year, and you put it up against the defenses this year, and I think they're probably third. They're certainly not first. They're just behind the Patriots. And I believe they'd also be behind the 49ers. And then I think there's a pretty significant drop off, and the Vikings would be kind of in the middle of that, the 2017 Vikings. So it's more meaningful to produce points against the Patriots this year than it was to produce points against the Vikings in 2017. With that being the case, I think that demonstrates that the number 4 defense in any particular year is going to have some degree of variance. The number 1 defense usually doesn't have an extraordinary amount of variance. Sometimes you get a 2013 Seahawks, a 2015 Broncos. But for the most part, the number 1 is usually about as good as a number 1 defense typically is. Like last year, the Chicago Bears and the Baltimore Ravens. But the Patriots this year at number 1 are extraordinary. And there's a lot of people saying, hey, they haven't, played a lot of good teams. The only good offensive team they played were the Ravens. The Ravens took them apart. But honestly, if you take a look at their performance against those offenses and compare them to how those offenses did against everybody else, they still blow people out of the water. They're a remarkable team. So, that's actually a really good way of looking at it. I'll think about incorporating that in the future. Yes. Yeah, right. Bye, Josh Doxson. I can't wait to listen to the Football Machine and see how Luke Inman reacted to that. The biggest, probably, Josh Doxson fan from that draft that I know. Which, honestly, I was not that high on it. Obviously, I thought he was a first-round pick, so, regardless, I'm wrong. But I was just kind of interested because I think the thing was everyone really wanted a jump ball receiver in that draft, me included. And he and Treadwell were by far and away the 2 jump ball receivers in that draft. So it was very easy to fall in love with Doxson. Treadwell beat somebody out for a spot. He is a special teamer and he is a pretty decent gunner. Doxson, I don't think is. So you've got that going for you. But yeah, I mean, really, the story is about BC Johnson and how incredible his trajectory has been from being maybe the worst receiver outside of the undrafted free agents in springs, in OTAs and stuff, to being very clearly the third receiver, even when like Chad Beebe comes back. So, props to BC Johnson, who was good enough to force the Vikings to make a decision at receiver when they may not have wanted to, or something like that. So, also the Vikings signed fullback Johnny Stanton because they lost Kari Blasingame to the Titans. RIP. So sad.
Next question is from John Belk, who asks, for the bye week, I'd love to hear a quick overview from Arif of how the notable first and second year players are doing and how his opinion of them has changed or not since they were drafted.
Well, let's start with the offensive lineman, right? Because there's a couple of new offensive linemen from those draft classes. So you've got Garrett Bradbury, Brian O'Neill. So Bradbury started off the year, I think kind of everyone is very familiar with the fact that he started off the year really poorly. Got a 0 pass block rate, I want to say, in the second game of the season from Pro Football Focus, which is obviously not to say that PFF is gospel or anything like that. But I mean, like people watching during the game before, a PFF grade or whatever was even available were expressing concern about how Bradbury was playing and what that might mean for the Vikings this year. I don't think anyone was super concerned about kind of what maybe the long-term implications are because offensive linemen, they can improve pretty dramatically. But after playing the Giants, and I downplayed his performance against the Giants because A, I thought it might be variance, and B, I thought playing a team that fields 3 nose tackles along the offensive line maybe is not the best indication of what it might be. But then he played well against Philadelphia, and I thought he held his own against Detroit. He has improved significantly. He had a good stretch of games there. And then obviously, he played well against Washington. And I think in a scenario where it wouldn't have been easy to anticipate that he would be playing well against Washington. But he did drop off a little bit. He got beat up by Chris Jones, which is not the worst thing in the world, given how good Chris Jones is and how fairly underrated he's been. But I don't know that he's at a place where you can be comfortable with what he's doing this year. But given just kind of the market improvement that he had over the past couple of over the first couple of games, I'm kind of happy. I want to see more from him when he's got a nose tackle lined up ahead of him in the running game, because obviously he's really great at the second level in terms of run blocking, and he had some really good kind of highlights as a run blocker early in the season. We're coming off a game where he was not a remarkable run blocker, but who was in that game. So. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with his progress given what we saw early on. But right now, I would argue that he's a liability with a lot of upside to improve, not just into somebody who's average, but into an asset. And so there's a lot of good signs there. Brian O'Neill is good but lucky. He's kind of a funny guy because I think per Pro Football Focus, he still has not given up a sack, but he's been in 3 games where I feel like, he's given up a sack. One of them, I believe, was taken away by penalty, so he didn't give up a sack on that play, even though he should have. One of them, Pro Football Focus ended up assigning to Josh Klein. I actually disagree with that, so I think he actually did give up that sack. And then there's another one here or there where, another one where somebody sacked through the left tackle first, and so it would have been a sack given up by Brian O'Neill, but another player got to that player first. So it's kind of a weirdly misleading statistic. He had a poor game against DeMarcus Lawrence. A lot of people do. He had a poor game against Khalil Mack. A lot of people do. But I think, I don't know, he's pretty good. And that's really good. I think getting a return on that in the second round is more than adequate. It's a fine return on a second round pick. I think the Vikings are in a good spot with him. Aside from that, offensively, you've got rookies. BC Johnson, just talked about him. You've got Irv Smith. The Vikings are still not giving him kind of the full gamut of snaps. I know Michael Kist asked me about this. I don't know if it was on this show or on his podcast at Bleeding Green Nation, but why isn't Irv Smith getting more snaps than Kyle Rudolph, who really hadn't done much for the Vikings until the last 2 games, where I think he has like 4 total touchdowns or something like that. And, Irv Smith is actually just a really good run blocker in a way that the Vikings don't currently have on the roster because David Morgan isn't coming back. So right now he's the best run blocker on the roster, which normally wouldn't be saying much, but he is holding his own as a run blocker really remarkably well in a way I don't think he did at Alabama. I think there's this perception that if you're a tight end at Alabama, you have to be able to block. And I don't think that's the case. Irv Smith was too much of an offensive weapon at Alabama for them to just say, hey, you got to block. But he's been a good blocker as a player. He's kind of limited in what they ask him to do, and I think that's kind of a playbook knowledge thing, but he's kind of growing in terms of the things they're asking him to do, and he's executing those assignments really well. He's only 20, really happy with him. Alexander Madison, not much to say here. Everyone's very happy with him. I'm happy with him. So with those picks, BC Johnson, Garrett Bradbury, Irv Smith, Alexander Madison, the BC Johnson pick, I didn't have much of an opinion on. The Bradbury pick, I didn't love because it's a value question about getting centers in the first round. I thought, you could get Alton Jenkins, who the Packers drafted in the second round, or the guy, Eric McCoy, that the Saints drafted, I think, in the third round. And I thought that Bradbury was a better center than the two of them, which is not turning out to be the case, but I did think the value for getting them later. Right now, that looks like a good take. Irv Smith, I thought was a really just odd analytical profile. I didn't super love the pick. I didn't hate it either. But I would say that's a loss. I think he's turning into a loss for me. I think that's turning into a really good pick. Madison, I hated the pick. I still kind of do. He's performing extraordinarily well above his pick slot value as a running back, but it's just I don't want to pick running backs in the first 2 days. So there's that. O'Neal, didn't love the pick. Actually didn't hate it. Was just kind of uncomfortable based on what I saw at the Senior Bowl. He has currently outperformed my take there. Mike Hughes, next guy to talk about. Very easy to just say, hey, I didn't like the pick at the time. Looks like I was right, but that's not the case. I think the Vikings are currently in a contract situation where Mike Hughes is becoming very important. And I think the balance of his play over his time with the Vikings is remarkably positive, despite the fact that he has just had some really bad games. And I think the ceiling is pretty sky high for him. So I'm definitely wrong about that pick. I think, would it have been better for the Vikings to pick a guard there? Maybe, because then, who's the corner that you pick in the second round? Maybe that turned out to be pretty good. Maybe it's Josh Jackson, from Iowa that the Packers currently have, who's not currently playing. But he played pretty well for a couple of games. I don't know if, he's on the bench for a reason, but, maybe that would have been a better kind of 1-2 punch. But right now, it's looking like a pretty good return on investment, even though we're coming off a couple of bad games for him. Jalen Holmes, didn't like the pick. I guess that's turning out to be a good take because he's not really producing as a 3 technique. Holden Hill, undrafted free agent. Loved the signing. That suspension hurts, but I expect a lot of good things from him. He's played really, really well. He had a couple of iffy games as a rookie, but also a couple of really phenomenal games as a rookie. And then he had I think 7 snaps, same as Doxson in this last game, and was targeted once and absolutely dominated that coverage. So good to see that. Sky high ceiling for him. Mata Afa, loved it. The fact that he made the roster makes it a good take because undrafted free agents typically don't. Michael Boone technically is a second-year player. We'll count that as a win too. Loved that signing. That's turning out to be a good take. So my takes on the first round, 1 for 2. My takes on the second round, 0 for 2. My takes on the third round, who did the Vikings draft in the third round last year? I'm trying to remember. Because it wasn't Holmes. Jaleel Johnson was a while ago. Either way, fourth round, I guess, is looking good for me. My takes on undrafted free agents, that's going swimmingly.
Yeah, that's your bread and butter. You should really just limit yourself to only takes on the undrafted free agents and just see how that goes for the training camp guide next year.
Right.
Kaylin asks, why does PFF rank Aaron Rodgers as the third-ranked quarterback? All important measures and eye tests say otherwise.
So I just published a piece on advanced statistical profiles for the offensive players in the draft. Or not in the draft, sorry, for the Vikings, with regards to Pro Bowl voting. And I mentioned that Aaron Rodgers was the third-ranked PFF player. That was not updated to the end of Week 12. It was updated through midway through week 12. So that's my mistake. But he was the third ranked player entering week 12. And he had maybe one of the worst games we've seen for a high value quarterback that's hit their second contract. So, quarterbacks that earn a second contract at the team that drafted him think that includes, Derek Carr and Jared Goff and so on. But that was one of the worst PFF grades I think we've seen for a quarterback in that scenario. Brutal. And that dropped him from 3rd to 11th, which is huge. Kind of makes me suspect of that averaging methodology, because how can you have one game that's late in the season drop you from 3rd to 11th? But he only had 2 elite games in PFF system. I believe it was Detroit and Oakland, which that Oakland game, very easy to give him an elite grade based off of what we saw. But the rest have been average to below average, and then that clunker. So maybe it's unfair to say that he's dropped off precipitously based off of the one game that we happen to see on national television. But this is a take we've been having for a while. I believe that Rodgers is no longer elite. A bunch of the analytics nerds are very strong about this opinion, maybe a little bit too strong, and they push up against kind of the conventional thinking on Rodgers, which is that he's elite but doesn't have enough support. But that doesn't make a ton of sense. I'll link a piece from Ben Baldwin on why the excuses for Rodgers don't make sense over at The Athletic. It was published a while ago, but one of the things people bring up is hey, he doesn't have, kind of the supporting cast around him that he needs, which is silly because he's got a top 10 receiver, and obviously the rest of the receiving core is not great and those tight ends aren't great. But if you have one top 10 receiver, you've got receiving options available to you, and the rest of the receivers can kind of do some make work stuff. And this question about the offensive line. So Rodgers actually, a lot of people think he has a bad offensive line, but his pressure rate is about average for the rest of the league. But he invites sacks. He's holding onto the ball longer than he did in 2013. But that was a problem he had going back 2008, 2009, 2010, even a little bit into 2011, although he had one of the greatest quarterback seasons we've ever seen. So he kind of more than made up for it. But he's now back to kind of holding onto the ball a lot. And that's making that offensive line look worse than it was. The best way to look at offensive lines statistically is a measure called pass block win rate, which is the offensive line metric that best correlates to wins. I think it's even better than PFF grade, which is unusual because PFF's quarterback grades correlate best to future wins over any other statistic, over QBR, over yards per attempt, over total yards, over everything. So I find that interesting. But pass block win rate is just how does, in the first, I want to say 2 seconds, does an offensive lineman do at preventing a pass rusher from getting by them? So even if it's not a pressure, an offensive lineman can lose the rep. So if it's a one-step drop and the quarterback gets rid of the ball right away, but the offensive lineman gets beat, that doesn't count as a pressure for PFF, but that does count as a loss in ESPN pass block win rate. And that's probably why it correlates really well to future wins. And the reason I bring all this up is because Green Bay is number 2 in pass block win rate. So he actually gets a ton of help. Plus they've got a top 10 running game, and Aaron Jones is a borderline Pro Bowler this year. So he actually does get a ton of support. And the idea that, he's not good because the people around him are failing is I don't know what people expect from elite quarterbacks, but it should be more than that.
Boy, it's almost like he's had people making excuses for him for years.
Yeah, right? He's been bad, and I shouldn't say bad. Relative to his own standards, he's been bad since 2015. And he had an 8-game stretch, I want to say, maybe a 6-game stretch in 2016 where it looked like he had it back. And then he's never brought it back again. It's not some people are saying, well, what about Jordy Nelson? And it's Nelson's dead, man. You can't bring him back. So if he can't be good without Nelson, that means he can't be good. Rip.
It's it hurts, in times like these, if I were Aaron Rodgers and I just got spanked on national TV, I'd want to talk to my family and see what they would think about things in my career, but I suppose that's not an option for him. Matthew Snow asks, I'm in the UK and doing Thanksgiving with some fellow Brits and one American. How do I convince these non-NFL fans to watch a game with me after the meal? Especially given 3 of the 4 teams are led by quarterbacks who don't lend themselves to exciting games. I feel like you have to go the tradition route at that point and be like, well, we're already doing a non-UK holiday here. We have to experience the whole thing and watch terrible Lions football for a while.
Yeah, I think that's the only way. So there's one American, and if the American is not interested in watching that game, that's a pretty uphill battle. I shouldn't say that game. The
heritage.
3 games, right?
You claim heritage. How dare you tread on your heritage? Sit down and watch the Cowboys and sit down and watch the Lions play terrible football. My God, that the balls are going to be flying all over the field and nowhere near the receiver going to the left. Just God. Yeah,
Plus, you can play like a fun. Here's the thing that I like. So if you eventually do convince them to do that, what's fun is that partway through the game, because they're not NFL people, right? They don't know the meme. Partway through the game, you can be like, "Hey, has anyone noticed that Mitch Trubisky can't seem to throw to his left?" And then he'll continue to fail throwing to his left. People are like, "Wow, I can't believe you noticed that. That's incredible."
Yep, you will look like a genius. Which Arif has been dealing with that label for years as a result of this
it's a heavy burden, but I think
you're willing. I
think you'll enjoy wearing the crown for a bit.
You too can cosplay as Arif this Thanksgiving with your Trubisky takes.
Yeah, find some flannel, get a hoodie, wear the two together for some reason.
God. Go with heritage. It's your heritage to watch this. If you're not watching this, the terrorists have won. Matt Myrick asks, what would you like to be thankful for this year? Not what are you thankful for this year, but would you like to be thankful for this?
I would like to be thankful for the opportunity to go to a Super Bowl paid for by The Athletic. I would love to be thankful for that. Technically, that would not be this year, but I think we can count that. That'd be cool. I would also like to be thankful for a raise. Just saying, would be cool. Things that seem more relevant now. I would like to be thankful for getting all this house stuff out of the way. I'm still dealing with like new house problems. I hate it.
Yeah.
Which is not to say I hate having a new house. I love it. I don't want to be a dick about that. I love it. It's just like
dealing with new like damn plebs. I just want you to just rail on everyone who's still renting.
I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and a generous loan from my girlfriend's parents. Look at you. I can't wait to be the subject of a Forbes piece about like how I spend my salary. Line item: gift from grandparents, $80,000. Yeah, normal human things.
Exactly. And just be like, how does the average athletic writer this week on Forbes.com, because it's not actually it's not in the magazine, it's just online. That'd be fantastic. I'd like to be thankful for a packed house over at Podolsky's on Friday, November 29th at 7
Wow,
p.m.
Incredible branding there, James. Oh. I'm upset with myself for not doing that. Incredible. I like it.
More than a couple people would be fantastic. But, yep, Podolsky's, 7 p.m., likely starting the recording 7:30 or 8 p.m. That episode will be posted quite late and will be available most likely on Saturday morning for those who will be listening to it. And you can listen to it all weekend, including on Monday, since that is when the game is going to be held. Speaking of which, we are giving away a ticket. Are you tired of me shilling? Because I am. We were giving away a free ticket to the Vikings Seahawks game. So, Kyle Sleepy asks, James, which offensive formations are best suited to exploit the Seahawks defense using all-pro caliber CJ Ham? You couldn't just leave all-pro. I think the argument could be had, you'd be wrong, but the argument could be had that he's an all-pro this year as far as a fullback is concerned. how to best dodge this question. People don't come here for my football takes, so it's hard to answer this one.
I believe in you.
You believe in me.
You believe in your ability to dodge these takes.
You know, as far as the best offensive formation that's best used to exploit the Seahawks defense using CJ Ham, I really think that we should look back to the mild success that the Vikings had in the last game that the Vikings had, where they ended up doing a dump off for no good reason for CJ Ham. I think it turned into like a fullback screen of all things. And then tried to run him right up the gut. You know, you keep doing that 3 or 4 times in a row, eventually the Seahawks are going to think that there's no way they're going to do it again. Oh, no. Oh, we'll show you. Here comes Ham right in your face. Next question is also from Kyle Slaby, who asks, Arif, do you believe that the marketing of turkey during the holiday season is a ploy by, quote, big poultry to sell off subpar meat at market price?
Would that it was. I would love it if that was the case. But no, if that was the case, we would not see a growth in the turkey industry and new birds growing every. They build turkeys, they grow turkeys, they raise turkeys just for this event. I can't believe it. What have we done to ourselves? Here's the thing. I was thinking about this recently because, of course, I think a lot about how much I hate turkey. And my girlfriend and I were talking. I'm willing to change my mind on turkey, kind of, with regards to heritage turkeys, because that's become a thing. People are they've kind of grown a little bit in terms of their presence, and they're a lot different than it's basically one breed of turkey that's sold commercially, which is not unusual for agriculture, right? Because I mean, it's chicken; it's usually one breed. Cows are almost all Angus. So at least in the United States. So, heritage turkeys, I've heard a lot of good things about. I'm willing to say heritage turkeys are good and not trash meat, but I have to have one and it has to be well prepared, because if I have one and it's bad, I'm willing to accept that maybe whoever prepared it, and that might be me, didn't do it justice, which is fine. But, this is all part of a collective, misery that Americans have imposed on themselves. It's not part of big poultry or anything. They would just as easily, in fact, maybe even more easily, because it's cheaper to raise a chicken, just as easily make chicken the tradition. I wouldn't be surprised if we went back through Thanksgiving history and found that actually it is a lie that was, created as a quote unquote tradition by the Thanksgiving industry or the turkey industry.
No. This whole spiel of yours and the whole, I could see this being, you opening up, instead of stonewalling here, you opening up here. I recently watched The 40-Year-Old Virgin, so I'm going to paraphrase from this. This is the first in like 3 conversations that we're going to have. The first one being, if we opened up in this situation, I could see myself, I'm willing to change my mind on it. The second conversation is, boy, I think I'm open. I think I'd be open for it. And the third one is, I love turkey. So your problem is
no.
You're opening.
There needs to be a distinction between the turkey that we get, which is a particular breed, and the other apparently much different kind of turkey. This is much like the candy corn discussion, which somebody has an issue with.
We'll get to it later in the
mailbag. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is a classification error. But yeah, going back, I wouldn't be surprised if the way turkey entered American consciousness in Thanksgiving was a product of clever marketing by the turkey industry. But we can't chalk it up to that in 2019. We have to be more aware of the fact that there are better meats out there, and we can't collectively punish ourselves by serving a food that just has such low tolerances in terms of its ability to be servable. It's remarkable. And the thing is, the Thanksgiving that I typically go to every year, by my girlfriend's aunt, they do a pretty good job with turkey. If they had expended that energy with say chicken or duck or anything else, it'd be a lot better. They do a pretty good job with turkey. For turkey, it's really good. But that doesn't, I've had turkey that I've enjoyed. It's never changed my mind. This question about heritage turkeys, though, it really intrigues me.
Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, this is the first conversation in like 3 that we're going to have.
I didn't even know about heritage turkeys until about like last week. I think it was on Bon Appetit, which also another question about that in the mailbag.
Yeah. So, okay. If you're going to open up a possibility there, I personally just can't stand like Jenny O turkeys. But that actually has very little to do with the turkey themselves and more to do with the city of Wilmer. So I'm...
Wait, do you think Worthington is the true turkey capital of the world? Is that it?
No, I just can't stand. I have a relative in the
rivalry. Oh, okay.
I have a relative in the Kirkhoven Wilmer area, and I
was really excited for you to get involved in municipal rivalries for cities you've never visited.
Exactly. Like, you know what? New Ulm is where all of this belongs. How dare you, Wilmer, Minnesota? Where do you get off? Kirkhoven can go to hell. Next question is Raul, who asks, on the topic of controversial food takes, nothing is more befuddling to me than the hatred of oatmeal raisin cookies. Are you a believer in their absolute deliciousness?
So here's the thing. I think most people hate oatmeal raisin cookies, not necessarily because they dislike the cookie itself, although I'm sure a lot of people do. It's because they trick you into thinking they're a superior cookie, the chocolate chip cookie. If you don't know that oatmeal raisin cookies are an option, and you go and you see, you've got a couple of cookies to choose from, and you pick that one and you bite into it, it's a nasty surprise. I mean, you've experienced like, hey, I think that there's water in this glass, and you drink it, and it turns out to be milk. Milk, a drink that you typically enjoy, now tastes disgusting for just half a second. Like, because of what you expected, right? And I think that's it. I think the oatmeal raisin cookie creates this expectation that it is, in fact, a chocolate chip cookie, and oatmeal raisin is an inferior cookie to a chocolate chip cookie. That said, I don't love raisins. I do kind of like an oatmeal raisin cookie. I would prefer it without the raisins. I think they taste pretty good. But I think, if you get tricked into thinking it's a chocolate chip cookie, all bets are off. Screw that.
If you find yourself in that sort of situation, then there's nothing you can do about it. And you just, you're stuck in that prejudice of, I don't like this because it's not what I wanted. And there are a few times when you sit down and say, I want this type of cookie. But I enjoy them. I've had many a fantastic oatmeal raisin cookie. Jack asks, is tofurkey best served warm or cold, and would you eat it on a sandwich?
I've had tofurkey once. It was served by a couple of very close friends of ours who are vegan. They're not
your friends anymore.
They're wonderful people. They're not great cooks. And we knew this going in, and we still had it, and the tofurkey wasn't great. I have had my mind changed about tofu generally. It can be really good, although typically that usually involves the introduction of an actual meat as a flavoring agent. But like mapo tofu is just so good. But I can't see... I don't see a possibility for how I've seen tofurkey prepared where the tofu itself tastes pretty good, because it's usually because it's a vegetarian or vegan alternative. So they don't include a bunch of flavoring agents that would make the tofu tip. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was good tofurkey out there. That said, obviously hot. Are you insane?
Cold soy. No,
absolutely not. I bet it would be fine on a sandwich though, because the introduction of a starch changes things pretty dramatically.
Yeah. Side note, we had a question hit the mailbag at one point about the Impossible Whopper, and I happened to have found myself picking up cheap dinner for the kids, and went, you know what, I'm gonna have an Impossible Whopper. So I tried it. I did not die afterwards, so that was, and I didn't lose my sight. So the first test is always, did it make you go blind? And it didn't. I should also preface this by saying that my version of a Whopper is no mayo, extra pickles. And
it does change the experience a little bit.
It does. So that's my preference on that. So It wasn't bad, but it was dry. And I don't know if the dryness was as a result of them skimping on the ketchup or if because of the lack of mayo on that, but it's not. So it didn't fail as a sandwich. It failed as a burger because it's not. It didn't feel like an actual burger, despite how they had like put it together. So it's not a replacement burger, but it is a replacement sandwich, and it was odd.
My take on the Impossible Burger. So I've had maybe like 10 Impossible Burgers. I've had a fair amount. They're generally pretty good. They tend to run on the dry side, and I think that's because initially people treated it exactly like frozen beef or fresh beef or whatever. You treat it exactly like ground beef. And it dries out when you do that. But when you account for that and cook it a little bit differently, it can be cooked through and be as juicy as a ground beef patty. I think it tastes a lot like meat. I don't think it tastes a lot like a particular meat. I don't think it tastes a ton like beef. It gets really close in a lot of areas. But I do think it tastes pretty good. So there is all that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine it tastes like a Whopper, the Impossible Whopper, but I can imagine it tastes like a meaty sandwich.
Yeah. I will say that the amount of salt in a regular Whopper compared to the Impossible Whopper is absurd. Like there's basically no salt at all in the Impossible Whopper.
That's interesting.
Which made it which made it appealing to me. I was like, okay, well I'll give it a shot. I'm on a bit of a diet despite the fact that I'm gonna be eating this god awful thing. So let's try it.
You held off on the mayo, you reduced your sodium intake. It's basically health food.
Yeah, it's not like I was going to eat the mayo anyway, but still. Zen Cubit asks, if one does not cook but is just going to the family Thanksgiving that will be serving roast turkey, does one just shut up and eat the trash meat or stand up for oneself and declare the bird be sent to the dumpster and better meat be served?
This is obviously dependent on the family situation.
Do you really want to be there? Are the three Brits and one American not wanting to watch football? If so, you can get yourself kicked out of Thanksgiving and not invited back by standing up for yourself, demanding some sort of smoked fish or chicken, and then to go home and get yourself an Impossible Whopper on the drive-thru on the way home.
No, but yeah, this is entirely dependent on like if your family's like okay with that, or if you're okay with like burning some bridges temporarily, or I don't know, permanently with your family.
At this point, they're complaining about the Wi-Fi password being changed to like some political statement.
Gary Johnson 2020. Huh, who did this? But no, if someone asks you, did you like the turkey? If you typically lie in that situation, probably continue to lie in that situation. If not, just be like, hey, what if one year we made roast duck? Doesn't that sound interesting? Yeah, or you could just be like, we've been over this. Turkey's bad. I don't know. It's up to you.
I don't prefer turkey, but on Thanksgiving, I do find myself and.
Well, so here's I'm an anti-turkey evangelist. Everyone knows this. I've never said that at my girlfriend's aunt's place because I'm not an idiot.
Because your relationship means more than being right.
Oh, wow. What have I become?
Yeah, well, I'd say you're basically married at that point, but I'm not going to. No. Because I've been playing with my ring the entire episode. Damian Barrett asks, can I please point out Arif's blatant hypocrisy? His turkey rant was a direct contradiction to his impassioned defense of candy corn. Dry? Check. Limited sale period? Check. Only good when prepared correctly? Check. How long must Norse Code listeners suffer under his tyranny?
All right, couple of things. One, dry? What? Two, I have made candy corn, and Luke Braun made candy corn outside of the Halloween period, and I've enjoyed it. I've already answered the question. If it's so good, why don't you have it on X holiday? Because I have had it outside of X holiday. So don't need to worry about that. Third thing, my issue is not that it needs to, quote unquote, be prepared correctly, because there are mallow cream candies out there that taste good. So they're already made. They just don't get to call themselves candy corn because I think Brock's copyrighted it or something. So the candy corn that you get sold is like shellac or whatever. Like literally actually shellac. So that's not it. It's this classification issue. They call it candy corn and it should not be called candy corn. That's the problem. It doesn't need to, quote unquote, be prepared correctly. And in fact, has a wide range of tolerances for, what it can. You just can't make it with plastic. Like that's the like that's not that much to ask. Where with turkey, you just get such a narrow range of how you can make it good, right? And you have to do it right. There's very little margin for error. And the thing is, if you take that exact same amount of care and time with another meat, you get a much better experience. Whereas with making your own candy, you're making your own candy already. It's going to be good. Like it's this, like, and candy corn is one really great example of it. It's one of the better candies I've had when I've made it. But it's like, I like it more than homemade taffy, and I like homemade taffy a lot. So it's not really the same thing at all. You're just trying to read into this, and I will not have it.
Ian Pauly asks, you have to invite one person from each team of the NFC North to Thanksgiving. Who do you invite, and what dish do they bring to pass? So here's how this works for me. I'll start. I would invite Aaron Rodgers just because I know that he's not going to be bringing anybody else.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
That got dark. So I'm gonna bring Aaron Rodgers. He's likely going to be bringing the sweet potatoes. You don't have to worry about bringing anybody from the Lions because they're always playing on Thanksgiving. So that kind of cuts out the Lions. And I would also involve Mitch Trubisky for the apple pie or apple brown Betty. And the reason why you bring Mitch Trubisky is because at the Thanksgiving table, one of the most annoying things for me is watching people pass food in two directions, or like they're passing in the wrong direction. So you bring Mitch Trubisky on so that you know that it's always going to the right.
Oh my God. You prepared for this bit. You're so happy.
That's
all right.
That's what I would do. That's my suggestion anyway.
Let's see. So this is interesting. So the Lions, they still have Damon Harrison, right? They still have Snacks?
As far as I know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For some reason I was like, was he traded? Because he always gets traded mid-season. I think that happened once, and in my head it's just stuck.
No, he's. Oh wait, actually, I take that back. His current team is the Detroit Vikings, the Detroit Lions.
Vikings. Yes. Yeah. So him, just because I feel like if he enjoys it, that's a really good barometer for, wow, I really do actually make really good food. Fantastic. So yeah, I gotta be him. From the Packers, I hear Zadarius Smith is a lot of fun. To be kind of interesting to bring. Rashawn Gary would be kind of fun, but I just wouldn't want to deal with that the whole night, because if he turns out to actually be a dick instead of me, I just want to find out who he is. But if he turns out to actually be a dick, like there's some rumors in the draft that he's a dick, I just wouldn't want to deal with that all night. So probably, I don't know, I hear good things about Adrian Amos as a person, maybe Darnell Savage. That'd be kind of fun. So, I mean, those are options. I hear really great things about Mercedes Lewis, so maybe him. For Trubisky, I think he brings turnovers.
I was going to make some comment about Khalil Mack not being invited because you don't want him to eat your lunch.
But yeah, there's got to be some interesting personalities on the Bears. I actually would not want to bring Kyle Long. I just feel like that'd be too much. Oh, Cordell Patterson from the Bears, obviously. Yeah. That just seems obvious to me. So definitely bringing him. What was the next part of the question? What did they bring?
Yeah, what dish do they bring? I think you answered
Patterson
it.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if Patterson made a bunch of Easy Mac and then put it into a Corningware dish and brought that and say he made it himself, that feels about right.
Wait, are you basically doing the It's Always Sunny, it's Mac's famous mac and cheese?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. I slaved on this for hours. God.
Snacks probably brings 8 million things, so I would not be opposed to that. Who's the other guy I invited? Oh, I didn't actually decide on a Packer.
No.
Mercedes Lewis. I don't know. He's from the South. It's probably good.
Let's yeah. Let's go to the next
not too
question.
worried about that.
Don from Ohio asks, pumpkin cheesecake or pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving? Oh, I'm sorry. This question is for James, since Arif the communist doesn't believe in traditional Thanksgiving foods.
Hold on. Okay, so you believe in traditional Thanksgiving foods and you're asking a question about whether or not it should be pumpkin cheesecake? Get out of here. The traditional Thanksgiving pumpkin cheesecake. Okay, dude.
The Pilgrims had pumpkin cheesecake at Plymouth Rock. How is
they crushed up their graham crackers and they blind baked them in their ovens,
and they recycled the boxes afterwards from the graham crackers because they were concerned about the environment. This is a traditional food. It has been around from time immemorial. Oh, that's yeah.
They're both custards anyway, so I wouldn't be opposed to either.
I would be interested in the pumpkin cheesecake. I know because I know what to expect with the pumpkin pie. I'm not sure what to expect on the pumpkin cheesecake. So
I think pumpkin pie tends to be high floor but pretty low ceiling, relatively speaking. So it's super difficult, I think, to make a truly tremendous pumpkin pie. But it's one of my favorites anyway. I don't really care. So, it's hard to screw up, but I'm just so interested in the pumpkin cheesecake. Like, what is it? Is it good? I have no idea. I don't typically like cheesecake, but I just feel like, sometimes I've had really good cheesecake that I enjoy a lot. So it's not like in opposition to cheesecake. I just don't typically go in that direction. But yeah, I'd be really interested in that.
Well, you've seen the Matty Matheson video when he ends up making like a lemon meringue pie that's actually like part cheesecake though, right?
Yes. Wow.
So I think if you ended up making it sort of like that, that could be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that and we'll see where that one goes. But I think that could be interesting. Also, what ruins the holiday season the most? Black Friday fights, fruitcake, or remakes of Star Wars movies?
Remakes of Star Wars movies?
Maybe he just meant releases of. Don was having a series of senior moments today while tweeting. He called himself out for being 90, so I'm just gonna deal with that.
So Black Friday fights are only awful if you are there. They're endlessly amusing if you're not. So I don't know what you're doing. I'm definitely not going to Black Friday, so that doesn't bother me at all.
No.
What is it? So Star Wars, probably new releases. I don't think I'll like Rise of Skywalker, but I liked the last two. Last Jedi I think is a lot better than The Force Awakens, but that's controversial enough, I guess. But I don't think I'll like Rise of Skywalker. What's the second one?
Fruitcake.
Fruitcake can be good, but I don't anticipate anyone bringing a fruitcake makes a good one, so it's probably fruitcake.
Yeah, my family never did fruitcake when we were growing up. Wasn't a thing, and I didn't experience fruitcake until my mid-20s, early 30s, and it wasn't bad, but it was just like, this is what everyone's been freaking out over.
Yeah, I think it's like an old meme, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, people have been complaining about fruitcake for like decades, and it like culminated in like the late 80s, and people just stopped bringing fruitcake because of its reputation. But I've had fruitcake. It's been good. There's a tendency for it to get super rock hard and dry up. But if you can avoid that, it can be kind of good. But I don't know that anyone bringing a fruitcake would do that in the first place. So it's probably bad.
Yeah. Hey, here's a question from a corpse. Dusty asks, how and how often do you clean your phone screen?
About once a week. They're a magnet for bacteria. Watch out, guys.
Yes.
There's alcohol-based streak-free cleaners out there. I assume they kill germs. I don't want to look into it too deeply because in case they don't, now I have to do something else.
Like, I don't want this to complicate things. Please, please don't. I usually end up bringing my phone into the kitchen when I'm cooking or chopping vegetables or doing whatever. So if I'm washing my hands, sometimes I just take the paper towel and just run the soap from my hand on the phone. Presumably it's killing something, or if not, it's just making the phone shiny. And you know what? That's sometimes okay too. Dusty also asks a question that I did not do any research on, so I'm going to lean on you for this. If I'm making a pavlova, sure. If I'm making a pavlova for Thanksgiving potluck, should I attempt an Italian meringue or just make a Swiss meringue instead? He's trying for the most hoity-toity of Thanksgiving takes right now.
Yes. So Swiss meringue is, Dusty knows way more about this than I do, so I'm sure he'll feel free to correct me. But a Swiss meringue is made over, so meringue, I should start there. A meringue is when you make an egg white foam and then bake it. Obviously you incorporate sugar into it because they usually turn into meringue cookies, but pavlovas are a little bit different because they've got gumminess in the center and it's a crispy outside. And I think it's just a much better experience than a meringue cookie, which tends to be flavorless in every respect. But pavlovas, you can make with what's called a French meringue, which is just to mix in sugar near the end of the foaming process for the egg whites. Swiss meringue is made over a double boiler until you get to 140 ? And an Italian meringue is made by pouring in syrup, hot syrup, made out of a simple syrup made out of sugar that you melted on the stovetop into the whipping process. So it can be pretty dangerous and it can be a bit of a hassle. So people typically don't make Italian meringues. The benefits to Swiss and Italian meringues are that they are much more structurally sound, and the heating element, before you end up putting it in the oven, the heating element ends up changing the sugar crystals in ways that I think increase the sweetness. So generally preferable. And then you can actually, they're also better at like being incorporated into buttercream frosting and stuff because of their structural stability. I would imagine that an Italian meringue, and they tend to be denser, an Italian meringue would probably be better for a pavlova, although people just don't want to deal with the hot syrup. So Swiss meringues are really good, though. I don't think you can go wrong here, but if you want to go through the hassle of an Italian meringue, probably do that.
Luke Braun asks our final question of the day. He asks, help, I need to bring a fun cocktail for my family's Thanksgiving and I don't have any ideas. Something odd to me, but also a crowd pleaser because I don't know the taste of some of the more distant relatives. My initial thought was like a hot toddy as a bit of a Thanksgiving drink. You know, I've enjoyed them in the past and they're not difficult to make at all.
They are traditionally Christmas cocktails, but who cares?
Yep, you can blur the line between Christmas and Thanksgiving, or you can just do the...
God knows everyone else does.
Yeah, like you're just going to do the Walmart thing, and yeah, we just serve these in September, now it's fine. However, I went to the trouble of asking Dusty for his ideas on your questions. So, if I may, I have a spiel from Dusty. I basically speak already in my best Dusty like accent, or my best Dusty impression. So I'll see what I can do here. I may have to use the word every 2 seconds. Dusty's response. If you're bringing a cocktail to a holiday party, my assumption is that you don't want to spend the whole party bartending for everyone. There are two ways you can go if that's the case. A nice punch that everyone can help themselves to, or a cocktail that can be made in a big batch ahead of time and then served with very simple instructions for your guest. My favorite punch is Elton Brown's Company Punch, and the recipe will be available on the show notes at the Daily Norseman. Batava Arak, which is needed for this, it can be found at most reputable liquor superstores. When I serve punch, I like to fill up balloons with water and freeze them beforehand. Once frozen, peeling off the balloon will reveal a fun, large, spheroid shape of an ice ball that will keep your punch cold without diluting it as quickly as ice cubes would. There's your party trick, folks. If you don't want to go the punch route, there's a cocktail that I've served at private holiday events in the past that people really enjoy. It's a cousin to the Cosmopolitan, and you can make the whole thing a day in advance without screwing up the flavors. The cocktail consists of vodka, Cointreau, lime juice, and some rosemary-infused cranberry juice that we make ourselves. To make one cocktail, you would combine a half shot of Cointreau, shot of vodka, 2 ounces of rosemary cranberry juice, and a lime wedge's worth of fresh lime juice in a cocktail shaker. Add ice, shake, and strain into a big glass. Just strain into a glass, rather. For a party, though, we can simplify this process a little bit and just mix together a big batch of the cocktail with a ratio of 1 part Cointreau, 2 parts vodka to 4 parts juice. This can be mixed together well in advance and then stored in the fridge. Put a nice bottle or decanter and let the guests pour it for themselves over ice and provide some lime wedges so guests can brighten up their drinks if they desire. A fun variation on this cocktail is to pour a splash of cheap champagne or Prosecco on top to give a little bit of fizzy brightness. To make the rosemary cranberry juice, heat up 32 ounces of a bottle of cranberry juice in a big pot on the stove and toss 3 to 4 medium-sized rosemary sprigs about the length of your hand in the pot once the juice starts to bubble, along with a tablespoon or 2 of sugar. Let the juice simmer for about 10 minutes and then turn off the heat, let it cool, strain it back into its bottle. Presto, you've just made an infusion. To really turn up the holiday flavors, add a tablespoon of whole cloves into the juice with the rosemary. And don't use triple sec, use Cointreau, don't be cheap.
He loves the detail on this. He was waiting all his life to be asked a question like this on the podcast.
Was. I feel like Dusty has spent a lot of time looking up cocktail recipes that like every recipe you pull up online has like a 6-page description of like the history of their person's family and like how they came over on the boat and you know how how this recipe like affected them personally and how you know their great grandmother swore to be able to forge shoes one day, and then oh by the way here's the description on how to make Dusty's version of mashed potatoes, which we really should put in the show notes again, just because it's always so good. But yeah, so but I'm assuming he's just read so many of them lately. He's just like, okay, how much detail can I get into this?
Right. So this is a fairly common complaint for like looking up recipes online, is that you always get like, you know, one summer I was talking to my good friend Chad. You know Chad, right? We were
a Marilyn
friends.
Haggerty article. Everything.
Right. Yeah. So this is a pretty common complaint, and they do it for SEO reasons, and it apparently works because we all see it, which means those are the recipes we clicked on, which means the SEO works. I hate you, internet. But Dan Olson, Foldable Human on Twitter, and he's got a pretty prominent YouTube presence, like complained about this on Twitter like a year ago, and like food blog Twitter came after them. They're like, you don't understand how hard it is for us to make this content. And he was like, oh, okay, geez, but like, you know, it sucks, right? Like you might be forced into doing this, but like that just means it blows for everybody and not just us.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, cool. Now that I know that this is like a requirement to survive in your industry, I hate it more. Like, what is this? I'm not mad at you now, I guess. Congrats. Like,
God. Yeah, pretty much. So that is that's your suggestion from the man himself as to what you should be bringing for a drink, or what you should be having for the drink at your holiday party. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. The next episode we will be recording will be on Friday. Friday evening, we'll be doing the live show at Pedosky's at 7 p.m. Seattle, Washington. having all sorts of fun out there. I'm not even going to do the rest of the shill because this is the last time I will be shilling it. Yay! So if you do find yourself in the Seattle area, head out to Podolsky's, 7 p.m. in Seattle. We will be happy to have you there. We'll be happy to talk before, after, not as much during, but we'll see. But yeah, head out. It's a hell of a lot of fun, and we really enjoy it. So, Arif, what do you have to plug this week?
So the Athletic just put out a Vikings all-decade. Well, actually, they did it for every team. But presumably listeners of this podcast are most interested in that Vikings-related content. So there's a Vikings all-decade team. There's also an NFL all-decade team. I believe no Vikings made that one, which it's kind of difficult to disagree with any of their choices, honestly. But, Cordero Patterson made it, so great. But yeah, you can check that out. I also I mentioned that statistical guide to Pro Bowl voting, but it's really more just like an introduction to all of the various player-specific advanced statistics that we tend to use when we talk about this sort of stuff. And it also provides me a handy link to go to for explainers next time I use advanced stats in an article. So you can have that eventually / soon. I will have the defense version of that up, but I'll be traveling to Seattle. I don't know if you guys picked up on that yet. So we'll see if I get that done. But yeah, that's the whole everything I'm promoting.
Yay. Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that revenge is a dish best served funky as hell. And we will see you in Seattle. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.